Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of NB Bassin. I'm Donald Patterson, your host. Thank you once again for joining me. As always, before we begin, thanks must go out to Fish Bomb Outfitters, Southern Yankee Baits, Carrot Sticks Rods, War Dog Lures, Northern Michigan Outfitters, Hooked on Canadian Angling, and most importantly, my wife and my son. Oh, Lord. I want to apologize for the late release of part 2 of this week's show. As you can probably tell by my voice, I'm a little played out. It's been a long day, but had some technical difficulties earlier, but we got those straightened out, and here we are. But in a way, the technical difficulties may have been a bit of a blessing, because I was debating what to really talk about tonight, or in this part of the show. It was going to be earlier today. I had a couple things in mind, and I don't know, just didn't feel right. But I got home today and I got my technical difficulties sorted out, and I got looking at my own to-do list, and it popped into my head that there really is something very pressing for me right now. Excuse me, with the tournament coming up this weekend. So I figured I have to get my own equipment ready. So why not look a little further into tournament preparation. Anyone who knows me and knows me well will tell you that to the core, I am a terrible procrastinator. Absolutely terrible. So for me, tournament preparation is normally Friday night, my truck backed up to my garage, tailgate down, normally a can of beer sitting on the tailgate, the outside dusted on, light on, and me trying to tie baits and rig rods. It's a habit I'm trying to break. I make no promises, but I'm trying. But that is a very, very critical part of tournament fishing. Some people spend Friday nights whooping it up with their friends out at the club, or, don't get me wrong, I love sitting around a bonfire with some friends and a cold beer as much as the next guy. But when it's, tournament eve, there's other things have to come into play. As I sit here on a stool in my garage right now, looking at a lineup of rods leaning against the wall, I know that as soon as I'm done recording this segment, I have to get to work. I have, 7 rods that I will be rigging for Saturday. Different weight lines, different baits, all kinds of different things that I have to take into consideration. And this all comes down also, or is also tied into your pre-fishing and the research you've done on the body of water where you've been fishing. Because you don't want to have to get to the boat ramp and be scratching your head saying, well, I don't know what I'm going to use today. Or at least you don't want to have to say, I don't know what I'm going to start with today. Now, I do have a ritual, being the superstitious type that a lot of tournament anglers are. I don't actually pick the first bait I'm going to throw. My son does. I may only throw half a dozen casts with that bait, but I always allow my son to pick the first bait that I'm going to throw. And probably 9 out of 10 times, I will catch my first keeper with the bait my son has picked. Now, I'm not saying that the fact he's picking it has anything to do with it, but it's part of my ritual, it's part of my routine. And that's something that each of us has to establish for ourselves. There is that little superstition aspect that comes into play. But superstition aside, what do you need to look at? You need to look at where you're fishing, the weather forecast for that day, water conditions. Is it clear? Is it muddy? Different variables like that. Wind. What's the wind forecast? Don't just look, is it going to be raining or is it going to be sunny? Is it going to be windy? You know, you're going to have a nice, still, you know, water like glass type, beautiful topwater morning? Or are you going to be fighting 20-mile-an-hour winds, you know, and heavy waves that makes your topwater fishing, I'm not going to say impossible, but definitely more, you know, more difficult. As I said, water conditions, clear, stained, murky. How bright a bait do you need? Believe it or not, folks, and I honestly wouldn't have thought of this until I witnessed it for myself. The color of your line. Not something I ever thought of. Early last season, I had bought a roll of, I believe it was Power Pro Super Slick. Excuse me, it was in a high visibility green. Almost a yellowish. It was such a bright green. Never thought anything of it. Here in the St. John River, which was the primary body of water I was fishing in the early season, it's tannin stained water. It didn't do poorly. I mean, I'm not going to say it did great, but it didn't do poorly. I was catching fish. I went across the border to Lake Pokemoonshine with Jeff Rathburn to fish a Maine Blade Runners tournament. Same spot, you know, we're on his boat, 15 feet apart, throwing the exact same bait over the exact same hole. He was getting hammered, I wasn't getting touched. He turned around, he looked at my rod. He said, put that down. He said, he pointed into the rod locker. He said, grab that rod. He said, and tie that bait on. So I picked up one of his rods that was running a co-poly line, tied that bait on, and it was first or second cast, I got my first hit. And we fished that hole, and we got hammered in there all day. But they wouldn't touch the bait tied on that high vis line because the water in that lake is super clear. It's a minor detail, but minor details can make all the difference in the world in tournament fishing. So look at your gear. Have a plan. Odds are, here it is Thursday. You probably already know the first place you want to fish come Saturday. Excuse me. You probably already know what bait you plan on throwing first. Now, this is New Brunswick, and it's the same anywhere if you're near water. The weather can change just like that. So I'm not going to tell you that there isn't going to be a change in plans last minute when you arrive at the boat ramp and you realize that there had been a heavy, freak thunderstorm the night before that dirtied up the water, and all of a sudden your darker, natural colored baits aren't going to jump out as much in the dirty water. So all of a sudden you're changing on the fly, going to a white or something else a little more high vis, something to really trigger those strikes. That's the roll of the dice. But 99.9% chance, you know ahead of time what you're going to use. Inspect your rods. Look for any eyelet issues. You don't want to throw your first cast and have the eyelet on what is normally your favorite rod pop off because it needed a little dab of glue. Check your spools. Make sure you've got plenty of line. I'm looking at one reel right now that I know after the last time I used it, I have to re-spool. I have backing line on it. I have mono on it for backing. And I'm out casting my braid now. Towards the end of the last time I was out, I was able to outcast my braid, and I was getting into my backing line. Time to change that. Can't have that come tournament day. I'm running 20-pound braid on that line, or on that rod, with only 10-pound mono as backing. The last thing I need is to have a 3.5-pounder come up and grab my bait, and when I go to set the hook, I'm setting on 10-pound, not 20. You get accustomed to a certain feel. So all of a sudden that 10-pound backing line may not take the abuse you're about to give it. And the last thing you want is to lose that big bite. So, inspect all your spools. Make sure you've got enough line. Make sure the line's not frayed. I've got another reel that I'm looking at right now that's going to be completely stripped. The line's getting nicked up. It was an older batch of line. You know, it served me well, but it's been on long enough. Time to change it out. You know, we're down to our last 2 regular season events for the New Brunswick Sport Fishing Association. And like I said, the last thing I want to do is lose a big bite because I was lazy or because I procrastinated. So once I'm good, once all my line is good, once all my rods have been checked, then it's time to flip open the tackle boxes. Do I have enough hooks? Do I have enough weights? Do I have leader material if I get into an area or a technique that I'm going to need it? Do I have a spool of line for leaders? I don't know. Do I have the appropriate weights? Not just do I have enough weights, do I have the right weights? You know, because if I'm fishing something where I want just a light weight for, say, a Texas rig, just to make some movement, and all I've got is 1/4 ounce or bigger, well, that's going to give me more than just a little bit of finesse movement I want. It's all about, you've heard the expression, the devil's in the details. Well, when it comes to tournament preparation, the devil's in the details. If you have rods that you say, okay, those reels are good, the line's good, I didn't even use it my last time out, check the knots. If you're going to leave that bait or that hook on, I would recommend cutting it off and retying fresh. But at the very least, very carefully inspect the knots. Look for nicks, look for frays. Because no, you may not have used it. But if it traveled in the rod box in a boat, or laying with some other rods on the back of your truck, excuse me, what's to say it didn't rub up against something else and chafe or fray or cut that line a little bit? It's simple. It's all easy stuff. It takes a few minutes of your time, but it will pay dividends. There will be that one day, and you'll remember the day for the rest of your life. There'll be the one day that you don't do these things, and you'll get on the water, and you'll get that big bump, and you'll know what's there, and you're gonna jack that fish up, and that fish is gonna be gone. And I hate telling people I told you so, but if and when that day comes, I hope you hear my voice ringing in your ears saying I told you so. Take a few minutes of your time, get ready. It's well worth it. If you're going to put the time and the effort and the money into tournament fishing, what's an hour's worth of time a night or 2 nights before the tournament? It's about the smallest part of the investment you're going to make in this sport. So just take your time, look everything over, and it will pay off for you in the long run. Ladies and gentlemen, I know this has kind of been a low-key episode. I'm utterly exhausted, but I'm out here trying not to procrastinate, trying not to save this work till tomorrow night. And hopefully I was able to pass on a little bit of information or a reminder that may help you get ready for your next event, or even not a tournament. Just your next day out on the water when you're out fun fishing with your buddies. Because trust me, almost as bad as losing a big check is the ribbon you're going to take from the guys when you get hooked into the big one, but you can't get it in the boat. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again for joining me. My name is Donald Patterson. This is NB Bassin. Thanks go out once again. Fish Bum Outfitters, Carrot Sticks Rods, Southern Yankee Baits, War Dog Lures, Northern Michigan Outfitters, Hooked on Canadian Angling, my wife, my son, my tournament partner Jason. Everybody have fun. Set those hooks. Keep those lines tight.